Hello, everyone. My name is Danny Antonio, and I'm the Community Engagement Assistant at She's the First. Welcome to Beyond the Glass Slipper, an enchanting discussion about the representation of women in fairy tale films with our global ambassador, Malia Baker, and Dr. Cheryl Antonio. But before we take a step into our magical afternoon, or evening, or morning, wherever you are, let's talk a little bit about She's the First. She's the First is a nonprofit organization that teams up with grassroots leaders worldwide to make sure girls are educated, respected, and heard. We believe in a world where every girl can choose her own future. And as a girl myself, I know how empowering it feels to have agency over my life and to feel represented in spaces of leadership, art, sciences, and film. And it's so inspiring to see someone who looks just like me portrayed as a powerful, strong, and independent woman on the screen because it sparks something within me to see it happen in real life. And with that being said, let me introduce you to our two lovely guests. First, Dr. Cheryl Antonio is an associate arts professor in the Department of Art and Public Policy at the Tisch School of the Arts at New York University. She is the author of Contemporary African American Cinema and the co-author of the book Dramatic Effects with a Movie Camera. She currently teaches the anatomy of difference, the other in film or media, and received the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Faculty Award in 2020 from New York University. Her photographs have been shown as a part of the Artists Alliance of East Hampton, the Montauk Artists Association, and the Members Show at Guildhall. Welcome, Dr. Antonio.
Thank you.
Now, next is Malia Baker. Malia is an actress, activist, and she's the first global ambassador known for her Emmy-nominated role as Mary Ann Spire in Netflix's hit series The Babysitter's Club. Malia also stars in this summer's The Descendants, The Rise of Red, as Chloe, Cinderella's daughter. And in 2020, Malia was voted as one of 17 Magazine's Voices of the Year. And she recently authored her first publication in the book Dear Rebels. And in her role as a She's the First global ambassador, Malia has hosted conversations with girls about the need for inclusive and comprehensive sex education, balancing activism while caring for your emotional well-being, and the intersection of art and reproductive rights advocacy. This fall, she'll start a new adventure as a first-year student at the University of California, Berkeley. Malia, I am so happy to see you again.
Danny, I love you. You know I do.
I love you too. My heart wasn't seen. Here it is. Thank you both so much for taking the time to speak with us. How are you both doing?
I'm excited to be here.
Nice.
I'm excited to be here too. This is going to be fun.
I know.
So wonderful. Great energy. We love it. And we love everyone in the chat. So now, are you both ready for some amazing and powerful questions?
We are.
So ready.
Nice. Let's get into it. Okay. To start, so this question's for the both of you. How did fairy tale stories such as Cinderella impact your lives?
Malia?
I'll take it away. I'll do the first hit. I'll do it. I feel like Cinderella, I mean, you hear about princess stories so much growing up. They're fairy tales, and they're fairy tales for a reason. You know, you look up to them and they're able to reflect on how you want your whole life to go. I think Cinderella in particular for me, I always love the Brandy version. And so it's funny to be here now and being able to kind of live that out in a weird way. Very full circle, but I always looked up to her in a sense of like, maybe one day I'll meet my Prince Charming. And then as I got older, I was like, who cares? Nobody cares. I don't care so much. It's beautiful to see. It's beautiful to watch, and it's an amazing story. But I think I've separated what I want my own life to be like in this fairy tale realm, and just understanding that a fairy tale can be written to you and what you want and your hopes and dreams. So that's how it's impacted me so much growing up.
Yeah.
Neil?
Yeah. So, fairy tales were a surprise to me. And I thought they were sort of lighter, and they sounded really light. But a lot of fairy tales sort of scared me when I was younger. Like some of them have dark themes, like a parent dies or, stuff like that. So I was really jarred by my concept of a fairy tale until later in life when I understood that they came from folk tales, that they were old, sort of dark and mysterious stories. Cinderella appealed to me as a young Black girl, as a version of a story, not my story or a story that I knew, but I understood the text, and I understood the idea that the strata of society to which she had fallen made sense to me, and I completely understood that. Where I really related to her was her spirit in that position of unkind living. And the thing I love the most about the original Cinderella was that she didn't pass the cruelty on to the animals, like that she was kind to animals, because I love animals. And that was such a key element for me, and so um, that's the one level on which the story spoke to me directly, not necessarily all the aspirations. I understood the social class and all that sort of stuff, but just the way she treated the animals, and she wasn't being treated well, and I'm like, that's my girl.
I love that so much. Yeah, I agree. And we're just in the first question. I'm already so inspired and I'm learning so much. Like fairy tales reflect so much of our real life. And I think it's powerful to see someone like Cinderella reflect into our own lives.
Yep.
Yeah. Next question is also for both of you. Do you remember your first impressions of Cinderella as a character representing women, and how has that impression changed as you've grown up?
Malia, go for it.
Well, it's funny. I remember thinking when I was younger that why does she need this prince to save her? Like, I don't understand. I was so blunt at like 7 years old watching the TV, like, this is so silly. Like, I could do that. I could probably make myself a carriage. It's fine. But I think as I've grown up, I've been able to reflect, especially working on Descendants. I did my research and tried to understand it from a more kind of Brandyscape of like, why did she choose this role? Why was this like the thing for her, and why do we all love this character so much from a woman's standpoint in particular? As a girl growing up in this world, why do we all feel connected to her in that way? And I think what I found out and what I learned more is that the things that really pivot the storylines are all women. Like when you think about it, the things that are all important in the story, even like the evil stepmother, like she's still a girl boss. Like she's still doing her thing. Cinderella, she works for what she has, she works for what she got, which we touched upon in Descendants. And I think that we can admire that and respect that as what it is, and respect that with finding someone that you love and that you respect and appreciate and want in your life in a romance way, just like Prince Charming is. That's another version of a lot of women's lives. Like we can also have this fairy tale romance and also be all empowering and all, a boss in our own way.
Right.
Which I think is really hard when I was younger to differentiate and have not contradict itself. Which I think now I've learned a lot more of, and I love, because I'd love to have both and not just one and the other. So that's what I feel like I've learned.
I think what I've learned is that, when you're a kid, you kind of think, in terms of good people and bad people. And yes, that's very true, and it very clearly marked out in the story, that there were a lot of women in charge, but not all of them are nice. Like when you're a kid, it's hard to grapple with, especially a mother figure. Of course, stepmother, in and of itself in the culture doesn't have the nicest connotation, right? But the idea that I learned something. It's for me, it was more of a metaphor. Cinderella, again, because I couldn't directly identify. it's terrifying for me to put on a dress. I would cry. So I had to, I had to see myself in the story in a very different way. And so it was about adversity. It was about dreams and maintaining your dreams. Again, about not, people are mean to you. You don't have to be mean to other people. So I learned a lot from it. And as it morphed over time and changed, because there's so many different versions, I think the core idea from that animated film really still stands. And it is, what do you do with adversity? And, the backstory that they open with so quickly in the animated version, she lost her mother, then she lost her father, then she lost her status. I mean, they're singing and dancing, and I'm like, whoa, she's an orphan, and for someone to have suffered that in the backstory and still be that light and whimsical in the animated piece was aspirational. And the women you see today, women have adversity just because they're women, or just because they're poor, or just because they're poor women, or just because they're poor women of color. And it's like, she kept her spirit. I mean, you got to go for that. You have to see that, no matter what age, race, gender you are, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's so beautiful from both of your answers to see the timelessness of film and characters that like at any point in your life, like you can go back to watching this film and you might relate to it in a different way than you did when you were like 5 years old. And I
Absolutely.
think that's so beautiful.
Totally.
Now, our next question is for Dr. Antonio.
Great.
What systems of oppression are present in Cinderella's story, and how does this impact Cinderella's actions and the actions of those around her?
Yeah. So, what's very interesting, and again, I went back to watch the original, um, is how they, um, paint the systems of oppression. So you have the obvious systems of oppression, which is in that house, right? Which I find particularly cruel. I think cruelty is horrible under any circumstance, but when it is in your home, the place where you are supposed to live and feel comfortable, I find that particularly horrifying. It's not school, or it's not some other institution that you go to and come back from. The culture is in this way. There's a king, right? There's a prince that is of the royal family, right? That's the upper class. And they exercise a certain level of control. They can call everybody to a ball, right? They have wealth, they have a lot of things. The next system, and that's not outlined clearly as a system of oppression, but it is power. Power is a system that can oppress people. The next layer is in the home. It's the godmother, and then it's the godmother's daughters, and then Cinderella's operating in that system. And I'm shocked again how joyfully and how kind she is. Of course, the animals help her, she helps them. And then she's relegated to this level of, and I don't, they don't talk about the economics of it, but she doesn't have, the authority of the finance of the home that was her father's, right? So there's all kinds of, her home was colonized, you could use that word, right? And again, she is living in this system, still dreaming, still hoping. I'm not judging what she wants. I don't want it, but I love that she wants that, and she has the right to have that. And I was more gleeful than I remember as a child about her getting what she wished for. And in fact, in all of the versions, right, of her story, because in one version, what she wanted was to have a job, and she got it, right, and Prince Charming went along with her to her travels. So I think it's the spirit, the inner spirit that survived the levels of oppression. That's what impresses me.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like Cinderella is such a graceful and powerful character, and her intentions are so clear and so true to herself. And I think that's the power that gave her to overcome these systems of oppressions, and she did it so joyfully and so
Yes,
gracefully.
yes, yes.
Yeah. Now this question is for Malia, and it's a question from our audience. Chloe A asks, "What truths do you hope you've conveyed to younger girls with your character in Descendants?"
That's a great question. I feel like Well, I hope that I've conveyed the truth of just the Hands Dirty song in general. I feel like that is, if you listen to it once, you kind of get the messaging. Right or wrong, cruel or kind, who's to say, you know? Kind of going into what we were talking about, morality, and how she finds herself looking into the good and bad of life and what she learns from that. I mean, I imagined going into Chloe that her parents probably told her the Cinderella story every night to go to bed. Like, it's a fairy tale, and you listen to fairy tales to go to sleep, and that's probably the one that she held closest to her heart because it was her world. That all gets crumbling down when she realizes that she may need to do some things that she didn't think was okay to help the people that are really in need of help. That's one thing that I really hope people are able to kind of grasp from Chloe. And I think she does it in such a graceful way that she's such, and I relate to this a lot, where she's just such a perfectionist and recovering people pleaser is what I like to label her as. But she cannot fathom the idea of not doing things the right way, of not being this goody two shoes kid that she's grown up and been praised for by her parents, by her family, and her loved ones. So I really hope that people, and girls in particular, are able to grasp onto it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to learn through your mistakes, and it's okay to look at yourself in a way that you thought was completely different of how you thought you were right or wrong, because I know I did a lot during filming it. Even little things like thinking my line was not the perfect way. I was like, let it go, girl. Director's got this. Like, it's fine. You're good. Life is a little easy breezy, and you can learn from those around you, which I think Chloe explains so perfectly. So that's what I'd say. Hopefully people are able to grasp that.
That's so awesome and so it warms my heart. And I think there's like you said, there's so much beauty in finding comfort and spaces of comfort through discomfort. And
Yeah,
that's like the beauty of life. Like that's reality. Like you live and then you learn.
I
And
know. I feel like that's what
it's
I've
an
learned, is
amazing,
that
yeah.
like if you're uncomfortable, it's probably because you're growing. Like,
Yep.
it's probably for a reason. Things are scary and nerve-wracking because they're worth it. So
Yep.
that's Chloe's label as a whole.
Life is beautiful.
Life
And that's
is
it's
beautiful.
so special. It's so special.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. Okay, the next question is for Dr. Antonio. So when Brandy became the first Black actress to play a Disney princess in 1997 version of Cinderella, what was the cultural moment like? And do you think that it's had an impact on how girls see themselves in the past 30 years?
Absolutely. I mean, the 90s were groundbreaking in African American cinema in general, right? It was quoted, I think it was either Variety or the Hollywood Reporter. I did my thesis on African American cinema, and the period between Spike Lee's She's Gotta Have It in 1986 all through the 2000s had such a burst of African American images, but also African American talent, not just actors and actresses, but directors and writers and um, people like Julie Dash with Daughters of the Dust, and Leslie Harris with Just Another Girl on the IRT that preceded this. And then you had all the Black talent that was in this show. So, in the cultural moment, right, whether the story of Cinderella appealed to all of us or not, it was part of a huge smorgasbord of offering of what was going on in Black life and Black culture and Black talent. I mean, what a rich time for young Black people to see themselves in very different stories, right? So, sometimes you only get one, story like Roots or something like that, and you can't see yourself. Of course, we want to be able to do the classics. Of course, a Black dancer can do modern dance as well as ballet. And so the idea that the culture was rich with imagery, and then of course, our contribution to keeping this story alive, from our perspective as Black Americans, it was just wonderful. I think it would have been very different for me had it just been that version, but the fact that there was such a large offering of African American cinema made it, I think, an incredible time, and this was an incredible and such an important contribution to what was going on in Black culture and Black images. I had a more intellectual response to it, but I liken it to my time, which was in, I think, the 70s, when they had the Wiz, off the Wizard of Oz. Like, that's what made me get electric, right? Like, oh my God, the Wiz with all these fabulous people. And I imagine that, the younger generation was having that same kind of excitement to that 1997 version, when there was just so much being offered for young and old in terms of Black images in traditional and new stories.
I love that so much. Malia, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I just completely agree. I think it's interesting to look at from today's perspective in particular of, I feel like a lot of the stories, they're played off of these iconic stories that already were. And so it's so interesting to see these original stories that aren't, the whole storyline isn't that you're a person of color. Like, that's not the whole storyline. And I think that's what a lot of the things in the 90s in particular did, and kind of broke that barrier of, they're just amazing stories. Like, you don't need to have all these different layered oppressions on top of it to make it feel real, to make it feel like it's connected to the audience that you're striving for and the audience that you're trying to represent in a way. Because a lot of the times that I find nowadays where I'm seeing films or art that is representative, it is for an audience where they're trying to learn, whereas an audience that already feels it, an audience that already understands it to that level of oppression. And so having Cinderella in particular, that 97 version, there was no question about that family line. Okay. Prince Charming's parents, nobody cared. Nobody had a question in their mind that, like, this is how the genetics work. And I think, I would totally agree. I loved what you said about that.
Thank you.
This is amazing. I'm learning so much. I hope everyone else is learning so much. Cinderella is such a great story, and it's only just that it's shared with everyone. The next question is for Malia specifically. So, knowing the legacy of Brandy's original portrayal of Cinderella, what was it like stepping into the proverbial glass slippers as her daughter?
Big question. Big thing, Danny. Incredible. It was amazing. It was what really hooked me to the audition in the first place, was that it wasn't just your regular Cinderella. First of all, I didn't realize that I was going out for Cinderella's daughter. I had no clue. And I thought it was, obviously I looked like me. So I was thinking that it was going to be this blondie script. And then I went into the audition room. They were like, no, we're thinking about getting Brandy back. And my jaw was just on the floor. I was like, this has to go so well. Oh my God, I need this. And throughout the months of being able to contact with her and kind of see how our characters would mesh, and meeting her for the first time in person and just asking her all these questions that I'd been wanting to for so long, of like, how, like, did you realize like this was going to be impact? And I felt like with my old jobs, like Babysitters Club, I was always asked the same question of like, so do you realize like how much of an impact you have on young girls? It's a terrifying question. Or the things like, how do you feel about being the role model of the next generation? It's such a scary thing to step into and have a label in itself. And there's no way you can have that label for yourself. Like, it's a question meant for every single member of whatever column you're in. But I feel like Brandy in particular, she kind of stepped out and was able to be that collective voice for a lot of people. And I definitely learned from her on set, and being able to pass that on to the next little youngins watching our movie. It's an honor. It's really incredible. And I mean, I get excited every time I see someone comment like, oh, I could really see myself in this. I had no questions of like whether this was meant for me or not. It fit, because I felt like that watching her version. So it feels very full circle.
Yep.
That's so beautiful. It's so nice. And Malia, you are so inspirational, and Dr. Cheryl Antonio as well. You are both making such great strides and making such an endless and lasting impact on people's lives. Yeah, gosh, I'm like so like amped up, and like my heart's so warm. Yes, the next question is for Dr. Antonio. How can we create new fairy tales with more representation of BIPOC Black, Indigenous, and other people of color and underrepresented communities without tokenizing people of these backgrounds?
By bringing folks to the table. Stories are great. Old stories are great if we keep revising them, as the Cinderella story has been owned and taken on and adapted by so many. But there are new stories, right? And I'm not about closing out the old stories. So I think to bring those people into the conversation, that was the exciting thing about African American cinema, was that it wasn't just Black talent in front of the camera anymore. It was behind the camera and in the writing and in the da 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 da. And so I think that stories, if indeed stories belong to all of us, do we not all have stories to tell? Do we not all have our own versions of the same story to tell? Can't we adapt? One of the things I did was to look at how many remakes there were of Cinderella, and I laughed hysterically because I saw Cinderfella, and that it even crossed gender, right? So we've got to include everyone. Again, it's give it to us, yes, but also let us tell our own stories or our own versions of the same story, right? Storytelling is core to human existence. It's how we pass on information and knowledge, and it's an important and vital part of culture. That's what the arts are. They're the passing on of stories and experiences and stuff like that. And it shouldn't just come from one place, because that suggests we have run out of stories. And we can never run out of stories. It's just, I can never believe, working at a school of the arts, that there aren't gazillions of new stories that are going to come. And I have to believe that. And so I really think that the more people that are telling stories, the more of us that are sharing stories with each other, the richer our culture, our global culture will be.
I love that so much. And I think that like with stories, we forget how important that the power lies in the people that tell them, and that like with inclusion at the surface, like we're not just wanting to represent everyone. Like we need to make sure that behind the scenes, in the process of telling the stories, like the people who have experienced these stories are the ones telling it. And I love your answer, and I
Yeah.
hope that everyone listening loves it as well.
Thank you.
Okay, amazing. Now we have, before we get into like some audience questions and questions from girls in our community, this question's for Malia. What do you believe Cinderella means to girls today?
Hmm.
Whoa. I feel like Cinderella, I think she's an inspiration. I really do. I think she's someone that you can look up to in so many different ways, not even like regardless of all these kind of columns that we put ourselves into, she's an inspiration for anybody. We exactly what Dr. Antonia just said, of there's been so many remakes and adaptations of it. I mean, Cinderfella, obviously everyone's able to connect to that story in one way or another. And I think having that sort of recognition, oh my gosh, English, having of recognition within a character and feeling like you can relate to her regardless of where she was at and regardless of what time she was made up, I think is saying something for itself. I think having someone that faces through and pushes through such adversities of being in that place is inspiring in general, but having this beautiful character who just spreads her light and literally just sings and dances and plays with the mice in our free time. I think that says something as to who we can all look up to in a very humanistic way, because I feel like she is that kind of glimpse of humanity as a whole and what we all can connect to.
Yep, absolutely.
Dr. Antonia, would you like to add to any of
Yeah,
that?
again, I think it's important that I say, as someone that, did not identify with the, even though it was animated, she was blonde and blue-eyed. So her surface was not, close to how I look. but her inner strength was. And one of the things I say to my class, in Anatomy of Difference, um, there are differences in our similarities, but there are also similarities in our differences. So she is a strong and hopeful woman, and the context of her story and her dream might be antiquated to me, but I wouldn't diss my grandma's desires and the times she lived in, and I would just see her strength in that time, right? So I think, if not everything identifies with you, what is her core character? And her core character is kind under the adversity that she's suffered, and the loss, and the being orphaned and losing her status, and strength. I mean, you can't miss that. And if you miss that just by looking at her blonde hair and blue eye, then you miss the story. You miss the core heart and soul of the story.
Yeah, I agree. And as you were talking, as both of you were talking, call me cheesy, call me cliche, but what matters is in here is what I'm taking from this conversation. Like truly, like our inner strength, our inner power comes from within and within
Yeah.
all of us. And it's there. It's
Yeah.
there. And it's just we have to let it out.
Yeah.
Amazing. Now we're moving into some questions that we have from girls in our community.
Okay.
So first is from Sayla S for Malia. Descendants Rise of Red didn't have any romance for the main two characters and focused mainly on two girls working together to prevent a past event. How does that type of plot change narrative on women and how they are portrayed in fairy tale movies and stories?
I love this question. I love whenever this topic gets brought up. I bring it up in probably every interview that I've done on this press tour, because it's not in your face at all. Nothing, it's not pushed. It's not, this crazy difference of like, she doesn't need a man. Like there's nothing, we don't even recognize it, which I think is so cool. There's no need for it because of it. I think Chloe and Red being such powerful girls in general and being such powerhouses, and even the way that they look and the way that they act within one another, it's kind of just how that Cinderella story is originally, of how each character and each arc is brought on by these women, whether they're good or bad, morally, wherever you line with those. It's brought on by these characters that you don't even recognize to be as cool, as female as they really are, which is just incredible. I think a lot of girls I don't even know if a lot of girls will actually recognize it. And I think that's the cool part of it, is that it's just going to be instilled in their brain as normal. And that's what I like watching. I don't like things being shoved in my face and being told of like, this is how it should go and this is how it was. And now we're here and now it's this amazing thing that we're doing this. It's just the way it is. And I think what's really cool is that that story in general is brought on by women too. Our main producer, Suzanne Todd, she was incredible, and she was the one that really tried to make this a reality. And as well as Jennifer Pang, they made this vision and this story in an arc that really just had us all envisioning like 5 girls coming together, having a sleepover, watching this movie, and then going making bracelets later. Like it's so unserious and such a cool messaging to have in your mind when you're growing up, that I'm just honored to be a part in telling it, and honored to be kind of the Prince Charming in this situation with my little
It's amazing to see how much film has grown in the past like decade, not even like maybe in the past like 2, 3 years, in which the world is your oyster. Like the reason why we have film and we have these stories is to show that anything is possible. Like there isn't a right, there isn't a wrong. We've just been normalizing and creating these stereotypes in which stereotypes should not exist. Like do as you please. This is your world, this is your agency, this is your decision that you need to make. And I love that so much. Now we have a question from Elena R for both Malia and Dr. Antonio. The question is, when you were younger, what was your favorite fairy tale film growing up with a strong female lead? And currently, do you believe there are more females represented well in fairy tales? And if not, how would you suggest girls challenge this?
Well, my favorite, fairy tale, which I was like, I explain how much I love Little Red Riding Hood, right? Again, one of the things I loved about Cinderella was how she treated animals, because I loved animals. One of the things I loved about Little Red Riding Hood is that she had an extended family. I had a grandmother. She cared about her grandmother. Her grandmother wasn't doing well. She was going to bring something to grandma's house, right? Being descendant of folks from the third world, we live with an extended family. And again, it was scary. And, I had to adapt to the metaphor of, the wolf eating grandma and the wolf eating her. And, there's so many versions of that. And then they get saved by the guy again. But I just love that, she had to make a journey. Her mother, again, women, her mother, it's 3 generations. Grandma doesn't feel well, go to get this to grandma. You have a journey, it's through the woods, don't, there's the bad guy. And so that still, resonates with me, and I thought long and hard about it. The idea of better representations, I just think we need to keep telling stories. I think there's always good stuff out there, and there's enough stuff out there to encourage you to tell your version of it. To recognize the new the world in the first Cinderella was a kingdom. It's like what, little country like Monaco, whatever. The world in the new Cinderellas are big worlds, right? So it requires different conversations. What we were talking about was, community and cooperation, not competition. Women are always put in competition with one another, and so that the themes stay the same but change a little bit. That's really important. But I think that, it's really important, if you want to see something different, if you're bound to tell a different story, if you're bound to write a different book, if you're bound to, this is what a lot of the artists come to, my school to do, to tell their version of the stories, right? And so I think both can be fine. I think we can always critique the representations, but do you commit to telling different stories of your generation, like the story we just heard? And so if that's what you want to do, go and do it. But a lot of times, I remember when I was writing a lot about African American cinema, folks were saying there's not enough this out there, there's not enough that out there. And the problem is, you really have to look for it. You really have to look for it, or ask other people to look for it, because it's not as accessible. And back in the day, it definitely wasn't. You had to work really hard and stand in line a lot to see Julie Dash's Daughters of the Dust. It's not like the streaming services now, where you can practically find anything anywhere. But I think that if you're critiquing it, what are you willing to do? And again, I work with artists. Tell the better story.
Yeah, no, I think I'd go exactly off of that. I remember last year, my best friend Momo and I, we did this meet and greet almost with this book that we did, Rebel Girls. And it was really just girls asking questions about how to get into the industry and how to kind of make a way for yourself. And there was this one young girl of color that asked, how is it as a girl of color in this industry? Like, I want to be prepared when I step into it. And I just said, create your own story. Like, you have to. I remember getting auditions that were Alien #2, and it was almost always like specifically for my bracket of how I looked, how I acted. Obviously we've come out from there, which is very nice. Whoever got Alien #2, I bet you did a great job, but like, I didn't get to do that. But I think what's essential to creating this sort of representation that we feel has been missing, that we feel that we, add on to stories that already were, is that people need to create more ones. And they need to have hope in the ones that we do create that are new. We need to actually fuel people up in the sense of, you bought Final Draft, that's amazing. Okay, do your thing then. Write it. Let's produce it, let's make it. And I think that comes from community, and I think that comes from finding people that are like-minded, and that you're able to connect with on that level of wanting to share a story that's new, wanting to share a story that's able to connect with young people of today, and especially in different brackets. I feel like something that did that for me when I was growing up, that was my favorite fairy tale, was The Princess Frog. That one, it scared me so much. We're talking about the Disney version, which this Dr. Facilier shook me to my core. And there was something about that was so addicting. I could not stop. I don't know if it was just me, but when I was younger, if something scared me, I had to like sit through it 10 times. Like there was no way I'm just like over and done with. It was like, you're putting yourself through this. You're going to have nightmares, but it's going to be so worth it. And that was that movie for me. And it was created by these really incredible characters that were, you know, adapted from this original story that was so different. And they made it into this New Orleans pick of just culture and richness and family and heart, and having Tiana be the full face of that, having her be that strong female lead in a way, it was so empowering because it wasn't shoved in our faces. I mean, she's a frog for half the time, but we love the frog. Like there's no going back from there. So yeah, I think that'd be my answer for that.
I want to say one thing about Cinderella. Her story, had she not had strength, had she not had dreams, someone else would have written her story. But she believed in a different story. We don't have to love her story. You know, we may not want what she wanted, but someone else wrote her story. Mm-hmm. Life wrote her story. Death of her mother and father wrote her story. The miserable stepmother was trying to write her story, but she had a different story and she pursued it. That's a really important part of that we can't let go of.
Yeah, very true.
As you were both talking, I was thinking about, if you're familiar, the main character syndrome, in which everyone on TikTok is like, I'm the main character. And in fact, like, I think it's a joke on TikTok. It's something that people have been portraying as and glorifying as like, hey, like, you shouldn't be the main character type of thing. But the truth is you are. Like, everyone is the main character of their story. So it's not a syndrome. Like, be the main character, embrace it. Yeah, and that's what I heard from both of your answers, and which is so inspiring and so empowering.
Yep.
And for our next question, we have something special. So we have a video submission from I know, it's amazing. We love the internet. From Grace from SCF Minnetonka chapter for Dr. Antonio. So I'm gonna.
Okay. Hi there, I'm Grace, and I'm the secretary of the She's the First Minnetonka High School chapter. And my question is for Dr. Antonio, and it is, which princess movie do you feel most accurately represents women's struggles and experiences? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Gee whiz. Is it Moana? Is it Pocahontas? I don't know. I can't. So what I'm going to say is that, you know, as a global citizen, I want to say all of them. I think I feel more akin to understanding other women's struggles in their context. Mm-hmm. And I think I feel enriched by all of them. And I think I understand more about my own by all of them. And with each of them, learn something new about my own situation. So, you know, it's very hard. It's very hard to choose. I mean, I looked at, you know, what they considered to be the top ones. And I thought, well, what could I give up is the question. Which one could I give up? What would I lose to give up this one and say, this is my, so I would say all of them, because I think that they compose a multicultural tapestry of women's ability to be strong, in adversity across cultures and different situations. And I think, you know, we forget that our own culture is constantly changing, right? And so what we learn from each other is just so important. And so so I would say all of them. I think all of them gave me something. And so maybe the answer is maybe just princess stories without definition. You know, it's like what they talk about when they talk about genre. Genre is a kind of film that no single film represents, that they all together represent when you say genre. So I think that the genre has something to offer all of us in its fullness. That's what I would say right now. Yeah.
Your answer made me so, so happy. Like my heart is gleaming with joy. You cannot see it, but it is bright and glowing and very sparkly because there's it's so beautiful how humans work and interact and we relate with each other, we have relationships and we have bonds. And it's really powerful and really nice to see yourself represented in a movie or a film, but it's also beautiful to see the other side of things because it makes you a better human to other people. And I think that's so important. And I love your answer.
Thank you.
The next question is from another member of the audience for Malia from Layla M. She writes, first, I'd like to say that as a 17-year-old Black girl myself, seeing you as such a heroic and inspiring leading lady has meant the absolute world to me. For future projects, how do you think the film industry can continue to better represent Black women and girls like yourself? And what aspects of your own experiences and perspectives would you like to see more of on the big screen?
Well, first, that's so sweet. Oh my God. I'm like, I need 5. I can't do that. That's a really great question. I feel like, honestly, I want to see stories that don't emphasize things as much. I want to see stories that are just themselves, that are just stories. I want to see the story of like having a crush for the first time, but it is a young Black girl as the main character and we don't ever question it. And she wears a bonnet to bed and we don't question it. And she watches the same TV show with her family every morning and we don't like, there's just experiences that I feel like are so monumental as growing up as a young Black girl in particular, that aren't, if they are emphasized, it's over the line. It's to get to a point. It's to get to a destination.
Yeah.
Whereas they're just a part of life. And a part of life is those things that you don't ever think about. It's just life goes on, time moves, and you live through it and you swim your way through whatever end course that you need to. So I feel like that's those experiences and those perspectives. I'd love to see like a coming of age story, just like a young Black girl. I think that would be so cool. Because it hasn't really happened in a way where it's just everyone can relate to it, but it is this girl that looks different than what we had known for so long as these coming of age stories. I remember longing for like my own Hilary Duff moment or like something that was of that source that really just hits home in a way that, like, this is cool. Like this is the Princess Diaries. Like this is really incredible. So yeah, I'd hope, and I'd say with that is that I hope that somebody that is from that perspective is able to write it. I hope that people are able to find that motivation and to find that strength and courage to, and belief in each other to just go ahead and write that story and make it a reality. Because yeah, we don't have a lot of people on the other side of the camera that are actually telling these stories, which is really depressing. I've worked with a lot of people and I have not yet seen someone that I'm able to connect with in that way that is behind the camera telling me what to do as someone from my perspective. I worked with these 2 older male white guys this year, and it was about this like teenage Black girl that deals with anxiety. And I'm like, how did you guys write this? Like, how is it like, how did this even come about? They did a great job, but it was also something that I produced that I was able to kind of have my voice heard in that different way. So I really urge people to, either be that producer, be that director, be that writer, be that storyteller, and be able to tell that story in your authentic truth and in your way that you'd hope the world would be able to relate to it. If not the world, then like you as a younger self, how you would want to relate to it at that age.
Yeah.
Malia, I would love to see you in something like this, and like to have not your Hilary Duff moment, but your Malia Baker moment. Like embrace that. I can't wait to see that because in my heart, I feel like it's coming.
Hope so, girl.
And now we have our last question for both Malia and Dr. Antonio, and it's again a special little video from an STF intern, Sabrina.
Cute.
Hello, I'm Sabrina Zun, and I'm currently 18 years old and also based in the US. And my question today for Malia is, how would you encourage girls attending here today to be involved in girls' advocacy, whether it be through their school, their career, or even in their extra time?
That's such a great question. I feel like really just do anything. Like literally do anything. Write an email, write something for yourself, write a journal entry. Like there's so many ways to go about it. And I feel like when people hear the word activist or when people hear the word involved in this matter of feminism, they usually go into this like, oh, they're usually with a bullhorn in front of like 1,000 people. And that's how you go that route. That's how you be that voice for other people. But it doesn't have to go that way, you know? You can do something from being at home. You can do something from a laptop or being on a phone. I feel like the way that I've been doing it is mainly social media. And I think that is such a powerful tool nowadays where you're able to let your voice be heard, if not for yourself, then for others. That repost button, that's a real thing. And you can do that in such an elegant and non even thought way, because it's very true. It's kind of where we're at. That's how people connect. That's how people are able to see all these different sides of the world. So I'd really just urge people to do something. Like it doesn't have to be you in front of a crazy audience. It can really be something as simple as posting something online and being able to have your voice heard and sharing things with your friends, or even having a discussion with your friend that doesn't understand it to a full extent. Those are as equally empowering and as equally important, because it's what gets the tale heard, you know?
Yep. You know, I'm very big on community and collaboration. I'm very big on the arts. I used to just teach film in the film department to filmmakers. And now I teach film in the context of the Department of Art and Public Policy, because film teaches us so much. The first thing it does is teach us about each other. So I would find your peeps. I love collaboration. I love working with someone else. One of the other things I've discovered in terms of advocacy is, allyship is wonderful. Sometimes, it's really hard for me to talk about, Black female issues. And so, I may find it easier to be articulate and advocate for Native Americans or Indigenous people, right? And so, how we work together, I think, is how we're going to get there. And for me, that's finding your people, finding your collaborators. It's such an integral part of creating art. No one creates art by themselves. It requires so many people. One of the things we're doing right now at NYU is our pre-college programs, and we always show them the credits at the end of a film. Look how many people contributed to this, right? Not just the people up front, the director, the writer, the producer, cinematographer. But I think core to everything, and this goes back to Cinderella, women are always put in competition with one another. We don't have to buy that. Let's work together, and let's work together on something, because we are stronger together than we are by ourselves.
I love that so much. And that's a great way to end our fun discussion and Q&A session. And like, as you both said, I think that community is so important. And especially with women, like, yes, we should not be competing with each other. We should be treating each other with the respect that we all deserve. And also, by working together, there's so much more power in numbers. And by working together, maybe we'll get more firsts. Like, as She's the First says, like, you could be the first and you could all make that happen together. So the clock is about to strike 5 p.m. for me.
Are we going to turn into a pumpkin? Oh no.
I'm gonna click my glass slippers, and it's almost 8 p.m. for Malia and Dr. Antonio. So unfortunately, we have to say goodbye and not see our Prince Charmings, because we are strong, independent women and we don't have to do that. So thank you both so much for joining and helping girls think about their rights through a different and more creative lens. And if all of you enjoyed this event, please check out our activism programs for girls at she'sthefirst.org. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. It's
Everyone.
so nice to meet you. This is so
Nice to meet
inspiring.
you too.
Thank you
Seriously.
for sending me on a journey